Your Serene Highness, Excellencies, Ministers and Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, dear friends of the Monaco Blue Initiative, welcome to this 15th anniversary edition of the MBI. My name is Jeannie Godula, and I am a journalist and a presenter with France 24, and it is my great pleasure and honor to be here again in Monaco to present the Monaco Blue Initiative in the beautiful conference room of the Oceanographic Museum. So please note that our speakers today will speak at times in English and at times in French. There is simultaneous translation available, so we invite you to use the headsets that you have in front of you if need be. S'il vous plaît, merci de bien prendre en compte que nos intervenants s'exprimeront en anglais et parfois en français. Une traduction simultanée est disponible et nous vous invitons à mettre dès à présent les casques qui sont disposés devant vous. So as I was saying, this is a very special year for the Monaco Blue Initiative as it marks our 15th anniversary. This special edition is also a very important one ahead of the third United Nations Ocean Conference being held in Nice in June 2025, and the Blue Economy and Finance Forum, which will take place in Monaco just before. The Monaco Blue Initiative receives financial support from Rolex through the Perpetual Planet Initiative and CFM Indo-Suez. Thank you so much for allowing these important discussions to continue and gain momentum. Also for this edition, we are delighted to work with 3 media partners who will cover the event: Le Marin, West France, and Euronews. Now, if you in the audience plan to communicate on social media, and we truly hope that you will do that, please use the hashtags Monaco Blue Initiative and hashtag MBI 2024. Thank you in advance for that. So we have the great honor and privilege of having His Serene Highness, Prince Albert II of Monaco, here with us today. Your Highness, thank you very much for your presence and for your leadership on this incredibly important issue. We're also pleased and privileged to have with us today in the room several ministers from Monaco. His Excellency, Monsieur Pierre Dartout, Minister of State, His Excellency, Monsieur Bernard Fautrier, Plenipotentiary Minister and Special Advisor to His Serene Highness, the Sovereign Prince for Environment, Ms. Céline Caron-Dagioni, Minister of Public Works, the Environment and Urban Development, Ms. Isabelle Béraud-Amadei, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation, and Monsieur Pierre-André Chiappori, Minister of Finance and the Economy. Also with us today, the co-organizers of the Monaco Blue Initiative, Monsieur Robert Calcagno, CEO of the Oceanographic Institute, Prince Albert I of Monaco Foundation, and Monsieur Olivier Vendin, Vice President and CEO of the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation. We're also honored to have several high-level guests who will take to the floor throughout the day. The Honorable Minister Jean-François Ferrari, Designated Minister and Minister for Fisheries and the Blue Economy of Seychelles. His Excellency Minister Antonio Costa Silva, Minister of Economy and Maritime Affairs, Republic of Portugal. His Excellency Minister Christos Stylianides, Minister of Maritime Affairs and Insular Policy, Greece. Ms. Leila Chikaoui, Minister of Environment of Tunisia, who could not be with us this morning, but who will join us later today. And representing the U.S. Department of State, Dr. Millette Mesfin, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Ocean, Fisheries, and Polar Affairs. Also with us speaking today at the MBI, His Excellency Monsieur Olivier Poivre d'Arvor, Special Envoy of the President of France for the UN Ocean Conference 2025. Dr. Dionysia Theodora Avgerinopoulou, the Greek Prime Minister's Special Envoy for the Ocean and the Our Ocean Conference 2024 Coordinator. And Ms. Charlina Vicheva, Director General for the European Commission's Directorate General for Maritime Affairs and Fisheries. Thank you so much to all of our distinguished guests for being here with us today. For 15 years now, the Monaco Blue Initiative has provided a platform for debate to discuss key challenges facing our ocean and indeed facing all of us who depend on a healthy ocean to survive. The MBI is a platform to explore innovative solutions, to identify synergies, to spur new partnerships and collaborations, and to complement and feed into some of the world's most important international meetings that discuss the future of our ocean. The MBI is organized as part of Monaco Ocean Week, a week that's completely dedicated to the ocean with more than 50 events coming up over the coming days. You can find the full program online at monacooceanweek.org. But for now, let's come back to today. We have a very full and a very exciting program for you. We have 3 exceptional panels that will delve into some of the most pressing issues facing the ocean today. We'll talk about some of the conservation success stories of the past 15 years and the future challenges ahead. We'll learn more about how we can ensure a sustainable and regenerative blue economy. And we'll take a closer look through our final session at the beautiful Mediterranean Sea, just over there. The objective of these discussions is to come up with concrete solutions that will let us reconcile sustainable ocean use and the protection of marine ecosystems. We do really hope that you will enjoy and that you will actively contribute to the debates, so please don't be shy in the Q&A rounds. But before we dive into the sessions today, it is my great honor to welcome His Serene Highness, Prince Albert II of Monaco. Your Highness.
Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers amis. Nous voilà donc, chers amis, réunis pour la 15e édition de cette Monaco Blue Initiative, MBI, dont la première session s'est tenue ici même en 2010, à l'occasion du centenaire de cette noble maison. Certains d'entre vous s'en souviennent sans doute encore. L'idée de la MBI était venue quelques mois plus tôt, lors de la 15e conférence des parties à la Convention cadre des Nations Unies sur les changements climatiques, qui s'est tenue à Copenhague à la fin de l'année 2009. Face à la difficulté d'avancer de manière globale, face à la nécessité de mieux prendre en compte les problématiques des mers et des océans dans les négociations internationales sur l'environnement, et face à l'urgence de prendre des initiatives concrètes en faveur de ces espaces marins, j'avais ressenti le besoin de réfléchir collectivement à de nouveaux outils. Des outils pour penser, pour collaborer, pour agir. Tel était donc l'objet de ce think tank informel qui, depuis lors, se réunit chaque année autour de grands enjeux qui déterminent l'avenir de nos mers et de nos océans. Distinguished ministers, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, bringing together individuals from diverse backgrounds to create common solutions together, addressing environmental issues without separating them from the human development needs, thinking about our immediate future while bearing in mind the long and very long-term prospects. Those ambitions which guided us in 2010 are still relevant, I think, today. And I believe that over the past few months and the past few years, they have assumed an even greater importance. Because in 15 years, our intuitions have been confirmed. Our determination strengthened, and the battle for seas and ocean protection has not only changed in scale, it has also changed in nature. There used to be just a few enthusiasts who advocated for the sea, a few ad hoc initiatives to protect exceptional ecosystems and endangered species. Now there is a global movement, and there is growing awareness of the fact that the ocean is not just another piece of the puzzle for our future, but that it holds within it most of the keys that will determine this future, from the climate to biodiversity, from food to health, from peace to the economy. These changes have materialized through several key moments over the past 15 years, moments of which we should be proud. I'm thinking of the ocean being included in the climate negotiations, an achievement made at COP21 in Paris. I'm thinking of the breakthrough in 2019, which was the release in this very same spot, in this very same room, of the IPCC Special Report on the oceans and the cryosphere. I'm thinking of the development all over the world of an increasingly dynamic and increasingly promising blue economy. I'm thinking of the promise of blue finance, for which my foundation, together with others, has initiated and which I believe we'll be discussing later. I'm thinking of the increasing number of marine protected areas in which my country is involved and for which we take action, including in areas beyond national jurisdiction. And of course, I'm thinking of the multilateral progress made over the past few months. The agreement on the high seas, on the high seas biodiversity, or BBNJ, adopted at the UN after close to 2 decades of work. Or the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and its 30 by 30 objective adopted under the Convention on Biological Diversity. Of course, this progress has not yet been enough to reverse the trend of degradation, and sometimes even destruction. Destruction of our ocean, which prompted the creation of the Monaco Blue Initiative. On the contrary, for 15 years, these disturbing trends have continued year after year, and the findings of scientists are still extremely alarming. However, we are no longer powerless in the face of this sad and dramatic news. We have the knowledge gained from our experience, new tools, and even greater resources. It is this knowledge, these tools, and these resources we will be talking about today. We will be doing so when examining the prospects offered by the blue economy, and through it, the role of the private sector in ocean protection. We will be doing so when discussing the protection of the Mediterranean Sea and the achievement of the 30 by 30 target. We will be doing so when looking at more specific challenges of a future treaty to combat plastic and the strict regulations of deep-sea mineral exploration. Through these various topics, we will aim to prepare for the major events ahead, because there are many, and they will provide us with the opportunity to make concrete progress. Next April, we will be in Barcelona for the conference organized by the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of the UNESCO within the framework of the Decade of Ocean Science. The following week, we will be meeting in Athens, Greece, for the new edition of our Ocean Conference, where most of these issues will also be discussed. And thank you for this invitation. Most importantly, we need to prepare for the next key event taking place next spring, which is the third United Nations Ocean Conference, which will be held just a few kilometers away in Nice. It will be preceded by several preparatory stages, such as the Blue Economy and Finance Forum, which we are organizing here in the Principality the day before UNOC. Because my government and Monaco's relevant institutions will be attending all of these events. We will be in Barcelona, where Monaco Exploration's new Mediterranean mission will be launched. We will be in Athens, where several Monegasque entities will be signing agreements to support MPIs with Greece's Natural Environment and Climate Change Agency, and thank you very much for that. All of these events will offer us the opportunities to make the choice of the ocean heard, to reiterate the need to give it greater consideration and to confirm the urgency to take action. Because this is the imperative today that brings us here together, as it has for the last 15 years, to pool our knowledge, our experience, our resources, our energy, our associations, our institutions, our businesses. In a clear support of the ocean and the sea, including the Mediterranean Sea, which you saw as you arrived, and which we know so badly needs our help. About the Mediterranean, I would like to remind that in November 2024, we will be celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Pelagos Agreement. This agreement was a forerunner to the creation of our sub-region of a marine sanctuary in a particularly dense and particularly precious area. More than any other, the Mediterranean needs such initiatives capable of reconciling nature's imperatives with the requirements of our society, with strengths and expertise on which we can build, but also with shortcomings and blind spots which we need to address as urgently as possible. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers amis, c'est bien le sens de cette Monaco Blue Initiative, et c'est bien le sens de la Monaco Ocean Week dans laquelle elle s'inscrit. J'espère d'ailleurs que vous pourrez profiter de cette semaine consacrée aux océans et à leur protection, car elle propose un programme aussi dense que varié dans lequel chacun de vous devra trouver des sources d'intérêt. Avant de vous céder la parole, je voudrais donc simplement vous remercier tous et toutes de votre présence et de votre participation à cette 15e édition de la Monaco Blue Initiative. Je vous remercie et je vous souhaite d'excellents débats et une très belle journée. Merci beaucoup.
Monseigneur, merci beaucoup. Thank you so much for those words of welcome. Now, as you mentioned, you did decide to launch the Monaco Blue Initiative back in 2010 when you came back from the climate negotiations in Copenhagen, frustrated about the inertia of action from world leaders on climate change and about the lack of consideration of the ocean in the debate. And here we are now 15 years later, thanks in part to your push for collective thinking. There has been a lot of progress in the ocean conservation space. And as you just said, we're no longer powerless in the face of this bad news. But of course, many challenges still remain. So our first session now will take us on a journey back to celebrate some victories, but more importantly, to look forward on action needed ahead. We will kick off this first session now with a keynote speech. It is my honor to welcome on stage the Honorable Minister, Monsieur Jean-François Ferrari, Designated Minister for Fisheries and Blue Economy of the Seychelles.
Your Serene Highness, Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me bid you a good morning. I really cannot fully explain how greatly honored I am and the Seychelles are to be present once again here with you in the Principality of Monaco for this 15th edition of the Monaco Blue Initiative. Your Serene Highness, I would first of all like to thank you personally for the invitation and for your hospitable welcome here in this beautiful city of Monte Carlo. Please accept my sincere congratulations for your visionary patronage, which has made the Monaco Blue Initiative un rendez-vous incontournable pour la communauté scientifique et politique engagée dans la défense et la protection des océans. In the case of the Seychelles, this partnership has resulted in what we believe has been a very successful expedition to Aldabra Atoll, which is one of the 2 UNESCO World Heritage Sites in the Seychelles, and, even more important, to the Serra de Malabanks, which is part of a jointly managed area between the Seychelles and Mauritius. And I salute the presence here of the Ambassador of the Republic of Mauritius. I can say we were immensely honored, Your Serene Highness, to be present at your very first visit to our islands. I will continue by extending my greetings and a very good morning to all fellow government and non-government representatives, scientists and civil societies who are here actively playing a role in the conservation, preservation and management of the world's oceans. If we are all here today, Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, it means that we fully assume the roles and responsibilities which are important in achieving global objectives in the conservation and preservation of our world's marine ecosystems. As we gather here, as guardians of our beautiful and rich oceans, we cannot refute the fact that we are still concerned by the urgency in regard to their proper protection and governance. In the case of my country, the Seychelles, more than 2/3 of our economy is dependent on the ocean around us. Inevitably, being so heavily and dangerously reliant also means susceptibility to pollution, susceptibility to overfishing, and to devastating effects of climate change, which we are bearing the full brunt those past few years. Now, globally, when it comes to marine protection, preservation, and governance of the oceans, during the last decade or so, it is clear we can, and we should, in all honesty, claim some very important successes. And the MBI is one of those successes. we have witnessed several initiatives with the same targets, but choosing different pathways of attaining them. Some of the most obvious examples include the United Nations SDG 14 in 2015, which looks at life below water and basically focuses on achieving certain marine conservation targets and abate marine pollution. The Paris Agreement, Your Highness, you have mentioned it, which addresses climate change, including sea level rise, sea temperature increases, and ocean acidification. There is also the Ocean Decade, which is, as you may well know, a strategic 10-year framework using knowledge and science to manage the ocean sustainably. Other important initiatives include the Great Blue Wall Initiative, the Global Ocean Observing System, the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Treaty, BBNJ, which our Parliament proudly ratified last week, making us the first country in Africa and the third in the world to accept this way. On behalf of my president, Mr. Wevel Ramkalawan, I accept the congratulations from this esteemed gathering because he pushed extremely hard for us to be not #1 in Africa, but to be #1 in the world. But I'm so happy to see that other countries are also in the race, and I'd like to congratulate Palau and Chile for having made it at the top, first of all. In the case of the Seychelles, therefore, I am happy and proud to say that we have achieved so much in ocean conservation, preservation, and sustainable development over a short period of time. When looking at the initiatives and projects that Seychelles is involved in, there is not a shred of doubt that they are underpinned by the all-encompassing concept of sustainability. For example, we have fully implemented the Seychelles Marine Special Plan, which covers for the entire 1.4 million square kilometers of the Seychelles EZ. We also have the establishment of the Joint Management Area, which I mentioned earlier, that we manage with the Republic of Mauritius. Locally, we are also at the point of implementing ocean science in every school curriculum in the Seychelles, and this is being done by the Ministry of Education. Nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot expect those initiatives to function in an automated manner. This is why we have also become active partners and members of organizations which act as watchdogs, such as, for example, the Fisheries Transparency Initiative based in the Seychelles, and the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, which we answer to when it comes to accountability for these particular sectors. Our commitments, collaboration, and will to face openly and transparently those challenges which could hinder the successes of those initiatives are also crucial to maintain the global ocean sustainability we all want to see. Indeed, our firm engagement with the Monaco Blue Initiative is also in the same spirit of innovation, collaboration, and transparency. It is also important for me to say at that point that all along we have had the best interests of our people at heart, meaning that for us, the socio-economic development of our people is extremely important alongside environmental protection. This is why we have opted for the inclusive approach of co-management. Most of our successes in delivering change has been realized with the engagement of exhaustive lists of stakeholders ensuring that everyone understands and everyone collaborates for real and impactful solutions. So you see, ladies and gentlemen, proper ocean governance tools, together with partnership and collaboration, has allowed us to stay on track and adhere to our domestic and international commitments, allowing, for example, for in excess of 30% of marine protected areas already achieved. So in recognition to the successes of local co-management in our islands, I now humbly repeat my country's appeal for co-management and co-development at the international level. Please avoid telling us what not to do, but instead let us discuss ways to find out how best to do things. Do not, for example, ever dare tell me not to fish, because I will not listen. But please tell me how to fish, how best to fish, and how much longer we need to be fishing and preserving the stocks for the next generations. Let us, ladies and gentlemen, be truthful and reliable and loyal partners in how we manage the planet. Your Serene Highness, Excellencies, this is why I call on everyone present today to use the Monaco Blue Initiative as one of these important platforms which offers you, scientists, around the themes of collaboration and partnership on the theme of ocean governance. There is not one size fits all. Let us, while we are here and after living here, make use of those committees, meetings, and workshops worldwide to continue to push innovatively and intelligently ocean conservation and preservation, and use our agenda for organizations or countries. We have achieved a lot, but we can still do a lot more. Let us be brave and take action when necessary for our sake and that of generations to come. I will end with those words. Let me thank you, Your Serene Highness, for inviting us, Seychelles, to the 15th edition of the Monaco Blue Initiative, which has become a monumental event on our busy calendars. And I congratulate you, as well as the Oceanographic Institute and the Prince Albert II Foundation, for working so hard to make this event a success. As such, I would like to wish you all fruitful deliberations during our time here together. I thank you for your kind attention, but even more so for your service and for your love to the world, seas, and oceans. Thank you so much.
Minister Ferrari, thank you so much. Thank you for being so frank about that need for collaboration and partnership on all levels. We have heard the call. The call's out there now. Find ways how to do things as opposed to being told what not to do. It's noted. Our first panel is now going to dive deeper into ocean protection and governance by looking at some success stories over the past 15 years and the goals for the decade to come. I'm so pleased to now ask our distinguished panelists to come up on stage. Can we start with Dr. Sebastian Troeng, Executive Vice President, Conservation Partnerships at Conservation International, who will be moderating this discussion. Welcome, Sebastian. Also with us, Minna Epps, Director of the Global Marine and Polar Program at the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Professor Enrique Sala, Explorer in Residence with National Geographic. Dr. David Obura, Chair of the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. And Dr. Malet Mesfin, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Ocean Fisheries and Polar Affairs of the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Oceans and International Environmental and Scientific Affairs. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for participating. Please take a seat. Before we head into the discussions, I just want to remind you, we will have time, a short amount of time to take questions after the panel discussion. And with that, Sebastian, I'll hand it to you.
Thank you very much. Bonjour, good morning. it's great to be able to take a moment and reflect over the last 15 years. For many of us in this room who live and breathe oceans, we often look at the next action, the barrier, the things that we're struggling with. And taking a moment to look back to the first time that His Serene Highness convened us here in 2010, it was really a different world. Just to give you one example, at that first meeting, only 2.5% of the world's oceans were in marine protected areas. As I checked this morning on Protected Planet, there are now 18,208 marine protected areas covering over 8% of the world's ocean. It's remarkable. We have a Paris Agreement on climate and a climate convention that recognizes the role of oceans. We have a global biodiversity framework calling for 30% of the oceans protected by 2030. We have a high seas treaty that we've just learned has been ratified by 3 countries. Looking forward to having another 57 signatories to get it to enter into force. And of course, a plastic treaty is starting to deal with that scourge in the world's oceans. So it's impressive progress, really. But if we take a step back, we also have to recognize that the big trends in the oceans are still going in the wrong direction. Seawater temperatures are spiking. February 2024 was the hottest month on record ever. Coral reef ecosystems are being pushed to the brink, with bleaching and coral death becoming ever more widespread. Overfishing is still depleting fish stocks and impacting lives and livelihoods along our coasts. Even slavery and human rights violations are growing as fishing boats have to go further from the coasts and stay longer at sea to make a profit. And just as we've got a high seas treaty, there is also an increased push of threatening the last frontier on the planet through deep sea mining. And so clearly our ocean governance and collective actions remain insufficient. We have to do more to turn the tide. We really have to accelerate our efforts and take solutions to scale. And to bring it back to that first example of marine protected areas, if we want to achieve 30% of the oceans protected by 2030, we need to create 16.5 million square kilometers of new protected area every year between here and 2030. That's an area the size of Russia every year. So we've got the work cut out for ourselves, and we're fortunate to have a very distinguished panel to help us dive into this topic this morning. So we're going to start at looking back for some of the success stories, but also where as a community we came short and can learn from it. And then we're going to look forward to what's ahead in the coming years. So perhaps I'll start with Dr. Obura, who was recently elected the chair on the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, possibly the longest title of any panel in the world. David, what do you see has been kind of the key drivers and action that has allowed this unprecedented global movement in favor of oceans over the last decade and a half? Are there some successes that really stand out to highlight?
Thank you, Sebastian. And yes, so I say IPBES, so please don't try and say the whole name because we always get it wrong, it's so long. But it's a pleasure to be here in the Monaco Blue Initiative, my first time to be here in this forum, so it's a real honor, especially as I come out of the ocean and coral reef community into IPBES and the global community on not just conservation, but people's relationships with nature. I think looking back over the last 10 or 15 years, what are some of the factors of success or that have really driven this huge increase in commitment around ocean protections? I think one of them is clearly knowledge. I think our use of science is just really improving. The science being produced is rapidly expanding in ocean spaces, in the high seas and deep ocean, as well as in coastal seas. But also our realization that there are many other knowledge systems, and this is one of the platforms or the pillars of IPBES's approach, is acknowledging and recognizing not just science, but indigenous and local knowledge and the practical knowledge that people have from undertaking the activities that they are doing, some for thousands of years, some maybe only for a few decades, but that practical experience is really important. And I think that's very clear in the development of our community in the marine protected areas and the focus on locally managed marine areas now and other effective conservation measures is really understanding that leveraging the actions of all groups is critical for success. Success doesn't come from just one direction. So I think that part of it is very important. And then also the development of technologies in the last 10 or 20 years, enabling us to communicate so effectively and so quickly around the world, has given an enormous power. There are enormous dangers with it as well, as we have found out. But all of these technologies can be used for good as well as for bad. And so working out how to really leverage the power and the good in the communication, in being able to reach out to one another and cooperate and collaborate and bring diverse voices together is a key thing. So I think those are two that I see that are very much fundamental from the IPBES perspective, and I can mention some more perhaps as we go into the discussion.
Thank you, David. Yes, it is quite remarkable how well connected we are now compared to in 2010, and I think perhaps the pandemic accelerated that even further. Next, let's dive into something that's really at the heart of the Monaco Blue Initiative, and that is partnerships. Minna, how important have coalitions and alliances been to achieve the success that we've seen in the last 15 years? Are there successes that stand out in your mind?
Thank you very much, and pleasure to be here. Good morning to all, and happy 15th birthday to Monaco Blue Initiative. I think that what really stands out, I mean, you know, we all can agree that the greatest success for the ocean was the agreement of the High Seas Biodiversity Treaty. That must be the most significant. But also the global biodiversity framework that came together in Kunming-Montreal in Montreal in 2022, where the whole world came together and agreed. But I think what was actually instrumental to that success, and the reason why they could agree, was because they had created a high ambition coalition, a high level with the ministerial outside of that negotiation room. And I think that was really instrumental to have that fora at the really high level that you can agree, and then, okay, you can leave the negotiators. The High Seas Treaty, which we know took a very long time, almost 2 decades in the making, there was a high ambition coalition for BBNJ, but it was also seen as, let's not have any distractions, let's really focus on getting this done. And I think that having that higher level or bringing into ministerial alongside the negotiation would have helped speed up the process. But we got there in the end, we really did, and so now it's just about how do we get beyond yes. Thanks.
Thank you, Minna. Often when we talk about ocean issues, we think about the spatial solutions. We've heard about marine protected areas and different efforts to the like. But ocean issues, of course, go further than that. And so, Dr. Mesfin, I was wondering, what does the 2022 World Trade Organization agreement on fisheries subsidies mean for ocean health, for tackling IUU fishing and overfishing around the world?
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation to be here. It's a pleasure to be at this. It's my first event as well. And so, just taking a step back from the agreement itself, I think it's important to think about sort of the problem set that we have here. We know that fish are really the primary food and nutrition source for billions of people around the world. We know that 12% of the world's population depends on fisheries and the aquaculture sector, and how important that is for sustainable development, for poverty eradication, for thinking about the building of climate resilient food systems. So these are issues that are important for the health and well-being of people's livelihoods, for the planet, and for our overall food security. And so when we then look at the fact that 90% of the world's fish stocks are fished at or beyond their sustainable limit, when we look at the fact that 1 in 5 fish that are caught globally originate from IUU fishing, it really makes it clear how these practices not only hurt our ocean, but they hurt our people and our economy and our planet. And it really creates an imperative for us to find ways to work together to put a stop to the practices that are contributing to unsustainable fisheries. So from the national government perspective, we can look at the tools that governments have to stop the problem, and we can also look at the ways in which governments are contributing to the problem. So on the latter, harmful fishing subsidies, which are estimated to be billions of dollars globally each year, can really create these economic incentives to fish more. And so going back to the agreement at the WTO, it was really the result of work that had been ongoing for many years at the WTO and other organizations as well, to really think about what is critical to the overall global efforts to support sustainable fisheries and combat IUU. So the agreement prohibits subsidies for those who are engaged in IUU fishing. It prohibits subsidies for fishing overfished stocks and for fishing on the high seas in the areas outside of the regional fishery management organizations and the in arrangements. And so it also includes robust transparency provisions for WTO members, their fishing subsidies, and the fisheries management practices. So the United States was proud to be among one of the first WTO members to have accepted the WTO agreement. And moving forward, we continue to exercise leadership in these negotiations to help reach agreement on additional disciplines and subsidies that help to contribute to capacity and overfishing. And so essentially, disciplining harmful fishing subsidies really benefits WTO members, people that rely on the fisheries and the sustainability of fish stocks themselves. So it's really an important tool that we see to address the breadth of the problems, both in our society and beyond. Thanks.
Thank you, and it's great to see some of the underlying drivers of marine degradation being addressed, including on subsidies. Now, Enrique, you've been working on marine protected areas for a long time. So when you look back the last 15 years, if we're honest, where as a global community have we come up short? What can we learn from what we didn't get right in these 15 years?
Not enough marine protected areas. This is where we come short, right? We have 8%, as you mentioned. It's been a huge progress. But 8% is in areas that are called protected, but most of them are lightly or minimally protected, which means that, for example, in the UK, most of the marine protected areas allow bottom trawling. You all know what bottom trawling does, right? I don't think that this area should be called protected at all, right? They are not even managed for fisheries. So the reality is only 3% of the global ocean today is in highly or fully protected areas, which are the areas that deliver the greatest outcomes, not just to nature, but also to people and to fisheries, right? So that's very clear. So this is where we are short. And the interesting thing is that we got this huge increase in the area protected. From back then, it was less than 1% fully protected. That was before the 30 by 30 agreement, right? These were countries, individual countries like the Seychelles, protecting 30%, where 15% is in fully protected areas, right? Or Niue, protecting 40% of their waters. Chile, 40%, where 25% is no take. The US and the UK overseas territories also, right? So this was individual actions by countries without the need for a global target. Now, the global target, hopefully, is going to help increase that level of ambition and action and delivery. But it was, to me, it was a very special cohort of political leaders. We had, I'm not going to mention them, but we had, for example, President Obama in the US. We had Presidents Michel and Faure in the Seychelles and others, right? So there was this generation of country leaders that actually made this possible, right? So we cannot underestimate the power of political leadership.
Great. Thanks for that. Yes, and that first generation of leaders is now being followed by many others, which is great to see. So let's pivot and look forward. What's up ahead? What do we need to do? And perhaps this time I'll start with Ms. Epps. You focus on the High Seas Treaty and highlighting what the win it is. But at the same time, we're now seeing this push for deep sea mining. So the world is recognizing that we need to better manage the high seas, and at the same time kind of charging ahead to try to exploit some of the areas, the few areas that have not been exploited by people. So what do we do? What do we do about this paradox? How do we deal with it?
Yeah, thank you very much. And also to say, going back, listening to my fellow panelists, we absolutely need to accelerate effort, right? If we go at the same pace, to get to 30 by 30 will take us 300 years, and we will all be gone by then. So we have to accelerate, and the High Seas Treaty is something that will actually enable us to actually establish marine protected areas in the high seas. So that's one of it. It is not like it was the Wild Wet West or it was lawless. There's actually 19 governance bodies that looks after the high seas, but very few has a mandate to actually protect, or they focus on fisheries. So it's the first one to really focus. It's the third internationally legally binding treaty of the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea that specifically addresses conservation and sustainable use. So we heard also from IPBES that less than 3% of the ocean is free. So with this, you also be able to conduct environmental impact assessment for new activities that might occur in the ocean. And we know that the ocean is going to be so much more important in the future. That's where we're going. There is the Ocean Breakthrough, which has identified 5 different sectors that are a transformative pathway in order to get where we need to go and to close the reduction gap in CO2 emissions. And I think we need to see the connection, how this is all linked, the ocean climate nexus. So if we go back, we don't need to tell this audience how important the ocean is, but we are facing a triple planetary crisis: climate change, pollution, biodiversity loss. And you mentioned deep seabed mining. Oh, please, let's not go there. It will not solve any of those problems. In fact, it will actually contribute to that. And I think that we also have to ask ourselves, why are we talking about deep seabed mining? Why are we having that conversation? Is the rationale that we now exert things on land and we have to go to sea? No. And we're not even talking about the same mineral. If you talk about something like manganese, it will always be cheaper doing it at land. So I get really frustrated when put on the stage and they said, well, you know, it's better to do it at sea than on land. No, that's very sad. And why should you choose between two things that you don't want? It doesn't mean, we know from fisheries, right? Aquaculture has absolutely exploded. It's not in lieu of fisheries. We're not saying, okay, we now started aquaculture, so you can stop fishing over there. It doesn't happen. It's not, it's in addition to. And so, but currently, there is no need, there is no demand. It's really a false narrative. And the science is not there yet. And we don't even know, not just unexplored species in the deep, but we don't even know what are we doing? What are we doing to the largest carbon sinks? There are too many unknowns. And if we don't need it, and let's just be clever, we need to really rethink how we use these extractive industries. What can we do in terms of recycling? It applies to plastic, it applies to mineral, but we really need to think about the reduce, but also how do we recycle? And I also, you mentioned the next generations. When we was working with Canada to host the International Marine Protected Area Congress in Vancouver, British Columbia, youth were taken to the street. They were absolutely furious. So I think that, you mentioned bottom trawling. I think if we were sitting here having this discussion 50 years ago, I mean, it wouldn't be, if we know what we know today, it wouldn't be allowed. But once you start something, I heard argument, we're just going to go in there and just take out what we need for the green transition and then we'll stop. Has that ever happened? No. And the final thing is, it is common heritage of humankind. So it belongs to all of us. And so if you were to extract minerals from the deep sea, how are we going to share it in an equitable manner? There is no benefit sharing mechanism. At the moment, actually tomorrow, Germany has commissioned a paper that will be presented that looks at how do you incorporate all these environmental externality and how do you validate. But still question remains, who is responsible? Where's the liability for damage that would have happened in the ocean? So as you can see, I get very worked up. But today, they started at the International Seabed Authority in Jamaica, and they are there to discuss regulations, because on top of it, there is no current regulations. There are some loose regulations for exploration, but not for exploitation. So we need to keep that, and that's something that's really changed the last 15 years. We won't even be talking about deep seabed mining. It wasn't in mainstream media. It now is, and the world is watching. So let's just not go there. Thanks.
Thanks for that very clear answer. So high seas treaty, yes. Deep sea mining, no. We hear you loud and clear. So Dr. Mesfin, we've heard how we need to accelerate action. We need to aim for achieving 30 by 30. Now I know that the United States, of course, is committed to that goal in spite of being one of 2 countries that have not ratified the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. But what does the US and other countries need to do to reach 2030 targets for protected areas?
Thank you. I think I'd just pick up on the comments that have been made in general, that the global momentum and the raising of ambition is really key for all countries, including the United States. When it comes to 30 by 30, we are all in. It was one of the first acts of the Biden administration to issue an executive order that set the goal of conserving at least 30% of lands and waters by 2030. And according to the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, we are at 26% of U.S. marine waters protected, and the number of sites are under review for new and expanded MPA designations. So I think that there's just more work that needs to be done when we're thinking about areas within national jurisdiction and beyond national jurisdiction. I won't rehash just how important BBNJ is on the areas beyond national jurisdiction. We continue to try to work through our domestic process and the next steps that we need to get to sort of ratification there, but we're also committed to working with other countries around the world when we think about the implementation of the treaty. So it's wonderful to see the ratification, and we all are trying to think about what's next when that is actually in force. There's other areas beyond national jurisdiction that really need to be areas of focus of attention. If you think about 10% of the global oceans are in the area below Antarctic convergence. So CAMLR has a key role to play here, and we are working and supporting all of the CAMLR-related efforts to conserve marine protected areas in the Southern Ocean. We hope and are continuing to watch the progress on the 4 pending proposals there, and including there will be a workshop where CAMLR delegations will be getting together this summer to talk about one of the MPA proposals and thinking about better krill fishery management there. So, but within national jurisdictions, I think, we all have the goal to raise ambition there. We, in 2022, at our ocean conference in Palau, launched an ocean conservation pledge, which is focused on getting countries to endorse a pledge to conserve or protect 30% of the oceans within their national jurisdiction. That, if we think about areas within national jurisdiction around the globe, that's the third of global oceans. And those are the areas that are really high biodiversity. They're areas that are really important when we think about fishery management and even things like blue carbon sinks. And so we continue to work with other countries to see if they can endorse the pledge. Right now we have 19 countries and we welcome others. So I think it's around the global ambition and keeping it strong. And even in the midst of us not being necessarily a party to all of the different international efforts here, we're still committed to the goal, and I think that those ambitions will remain and continue and be high. And again, both when we think about what we can do nationally and then in the areas beyond national jurisdiction. Thank you.
Great, and thank you for your leadership on oceans and for reminding us that we can't really achieve the 2030 goals unless we see expanded protection in CAMLR. There's 3 proposals for very large marine protected areas, and they're going to be essential if we want to achieve the 2030 targets, and obviously countries around the world have key roles to play in making that happen. Now, Enrique, you pointed out we need to do more. And I would imagine that quite often people tell you, say, look, Enrique, 8% in marine protected areas, only a couple of percent well protected. If we can't finance effective management of existing marine protected areas, why should we go to 30%? What do we do about the financing capacity gaps to manage marine protected areas effectively?
Well, that's the wrong question to start with, and this is the question that is posed by those who want to delay, right? And these tend to be those who get away with murder, right? So the question is not whether we have enough, but how are we spending what we have, right? It is clear the 30 by 30 goal is science-based, right? And it's a minimum, and it is not, at the end it's going to be up to every country to decide how much they want to protect. But the science and the economics are very clear, right? We were talking about, our MC was talking before about we need to develop a sustainable and regenerative blue economy, right? Well, the blue economy until now has been unsustainable and extractive, right? There is nothing regenerative about taking out. The ocean is like a bank account where everybody withdraws and nobody makes a deposit. The only investments accounts we have with the principal set aside that produces returns is this 3% that is fully protected now, right? And the science is very clear. If we protect more, if we protect the right 30%, actually the world is going to get a net gain in fish catch. We have subsidized our economic growth and our prosperity on the destruction of nature. But we have reached the point where there is not enough nature out there to subsidize us anymore. So now people are suffering because there is not enough to exploit, right? So the only way to fish better is to improve the way we fish, right? Actually, fishing a little less and protecting the right areas so they can regenerate the rest. And actually, people are going to be able to catch more fish with less effort, right? And there are examples all around the world showing that these marine protected areas are such great business. The local fishermen are catching more around these no-take areas than before when they were fishing all over the place, right? So if it's a good business, why are we asking the question of how can we afford it? If we think just about the gross costs of protecting 30% of the ocean, there's been some studies. So an analysis suggests that $20 billion, right? And forget the benefits for a second. $20 billion would be enough to manage every year a network of marine protected areas, highly protected, covering 30% of the ocean, right? $20 billion. Guess how much the governments of the world are subsidizing the fishing industry to overfish every year? $20 billion, right? So the money is there, but we have given permission to our governments to subsidize the overexploitation, the overfishing of this of marine life, right? So the money is there. There is enough public money. The same way that people ask, oh, why should we protect more if we don't have the resources? So it's clear this question is void. But also, we hear a lot, oh, we need private investment, we need the private sector to come and innovative finance and all that stuff. Again, these are distractions. Of course, we need more investments in the ocean. We have great businesses in the ocean, right? And that requires more investment. But the protection to allow for regeneration, right? There is enough public money out there. So my answer to your question is, there is no option. We have to do it. If we want to continue fishing and feeding people, and we want to continue enjoying all these things that ocean life does for us, including carbon sequestration, right? We know that the more life there is in the ocean, the more carbon it sequesters. Everything that we obtain from the ocean that we love is from ocean life. If we keep depleting ocean life, we're not going to get more. Right? The only way to get more is to give some space and time so marine life can restore in some areas. And it is that increase in marine life that is going to give us the increased benefits. Right? That's the law of biology and physics.
Thank you, Enrique. So let's use the subsidies for things that are good for the oceans rather than things that are bad for the oceans. I'll have one more question, then we'll open up for the audience to ask questions. So please think about clever things to ask this distinguished panel. So the final question, looking forward, goes to Dr. Obura. Now, with this global movement we have, this momentum, there are more and more political opportunities to move quickly, to advance ocean governance, to expand marine protected areas. You know, how do we balance that with moving, what people often say, moving with the speed of trust, so that you allow that rigorous engagement of local communities and other stakeholders to find solutions that are truly sustainable? How do we balance that, taking advantage of the opportunity, but also doing it rigorously?
Yeah, thanks, Sebastian. So I love the way you framed that question, the speed of trust. And in a way, to some extent, that almost puts the onus on the person you're asking trust from. You know, why are they so slow to trust us? Whereas, of course, the onus is on the people requesting the trust. And this is where the importance of really, we just had an amazing call for co-development, I think, from the Minister from the Seychelles, I think put very powerfully, that we do have a global problem and we need global solutions. And in order to find the right solutions, we need to talk together, to co-develop those solutions. So I think doing that is particularly important. There are many frameworks that allow us to do it. And I think one thing I've enjoyed coming into the IPBES framing, so we have a conceptual framework that is very explicit about the state of nature and what we do with it and protection and so on. But what are the direct drivers of decline? And we talk about those a lot, so fishing and climate change and so on. But it's the indirect drivers behind those direct drivers that are the things that we gloss over, that we sort of never quite touch, and they're the elephants in the room. So this is, why do we give subsidies in one direction rather than another direction? And that represents value systems from a particular sort of market-oriented framing of profit-making and of just extracting from the ocean and from nature. If we were to really incorporate multiple values and different perspectives from different countries and cultures that value life where it is, or that value long-term sustainability rather than short-term profit, those are ways that we can really build the trust to identify together what the solutions can be. And I think a key part of that as well is recognizing that, you know, the decline of natural systems of the ocean has come through extraction and exploitation over centuries. And what we have done over time is we have really taken out of that bank account, we've converted natural capital into financial capital, and financial capital gets accumulated and concentrated, is the nature of markets and the capitalist system that we have, this accumulation of capital into fewer and fewer pockets, really, and countries. And it's to build trust, I think we need to work out what is the discourse, what is the value system, and how do we really recognize that in order to sufficiently finance the protection that is needed, the finance is there, it's being used for the wrong things. How do we transfer this financial capital back into natural capital to protect and sustain nature where it is in local spaces? And as we do that, as we put finance back into natural systems in local spaces everywhere, that nature is secure. It becomes secure. It's the property, it's under the stewardship of the people in that place, the countries, the communities, the jurisdictions in that place, rather than being under the control of those providing the finance from somewhere else, which is the model we have right now. It is a bit of a top-down process. So how do we build that discourse? How do we build the trust rapidly? Because we need to do that. And I think that co-development process, having this discourse in multiple different fora, and I'm seeing it in the ocean spaces like this, I'm seeing it in forests around the Amazon, for example. That's a particularly sharp point of discussion because of the amazing biodiversity and importance of the Amazon basin, not just in Brazil, but for the countries in that region and for the planet as well in so many ways. So building that trust is really critical, and these discourses are a critical part of that, and that we connect them all together. The last thing I'll say there is that, you know, being in IPBES, we are a science policy platform, so our role is to synthesize science, to provide options for decision makers to make the decisions. It's not for us to prescribe certain things to do, but we can identify what the science is saying that we can pull together, and with the framework that we have to understand it, is if you want certain outcomes, these are the options that help drive in that direction. And the two assessments we're finishing at the end of this year on the nexus, so interlinkages across all of these different sectors, and on transformative change, we hope will really give very tangible tools for countries and decision makers and companies, communities to use to build trust, to work out how to transform in positive directions together and not keep going just because this is the way things are and we don't quite know how to get out of the rut that we're in.
Great. Thank you, David, for that thoughtful response. And I think we're ready to take some questions for the audience.
And I apologize in advance. Our time is short, so we really just have 5 minutes, so maybe one, possibly two very brief, please, questions. And you can continue the discussion, of course, during the break. Monsieur Calcagno, did you have a question?
Thank you, Jenny. Enrique, my friend Enrique, I do not agree with you when you answer Sebastian Troeng's question about how to finance MPA. I don't think it is a question from those who want to delay MPA. It is an essential question. We know that some countries are able to finance MPA implementation, while some others are not able to finance MPA implementation and need some assistance from the international community. Jean-François Ferrari, my friend, and the Mauritius representative, His Excellency Valeidan. You just mentioned the Saya de Mala. So this is clearly, it's not even in Seychelles or Mauritius, it's in BBNJ. Thank you, Mina, to mention the BBNJ Agreement. So how to finance IC's MPA? And we need to develop a full range of solutions of financing, from state financing, of course, but to multilateral, to biodiversity credit, to swap debt to natures, to private investment, to biodiversity credit. And I know that in this room, many of you, Pascal Lamy shared yesterday a steering committee of the Blue Economy and Finance Forum. Sylvie Goulard is actively working on the biodiversity market, want to develop that. And I think it is an important question that we need to answer if we need to develop efficient marine protected areas. But I know that you do agree about that.
No, thank you for your comment, Robert. And I didn't mean to say that all countries have resources. Of course not, right? And I totally agree with you about the need for a portfolio of financing mechanisms, and the optimal portfolio of financing mechanism is going to be different in Seychelles or Palau or Spain, right? Spain, France, Portugal, the European Union doesn't have more protected areas just because they don't have financing, right? So usually if you don't have more protected areas, is in great part because of the opposition by the industrial fishing lobbies, right? That's something clear. Now, something I forgot to mention is that every dollar invested in a highly protected area, in a marine reserve, generates $10 in economic output. I did my work in the Medes Islands, 1 square kilometer in the Costa Brava in Catalonia. 1 square kilometer fully protected generates 16 million euros per year in tourism revenue. The cost of managing that reserve is €500,000, right? You know, these reserves are businesses. So also we need to change the mindset that the reserves come at a cost to somebody, right? These coastal towns, they didn't need assistance. People build hotels and restaurants, they didn't need assistance, right? They know that they invest, and after a few years, they're going to get a profit. If planned properly, these coastal marine reserves can do the same thing. We have plenty of examples. They are great businesses. So this is where the private sector comes in, right? We cannot expect every protected area to be a burden to society, to the public treasury, right? So we still have, the world as a whole, still has enough money to cover the cost of managing, and most of this money is in the global north, and this is where you are absolutely right, that there should be some flow of funding so countries in the global south can implement these protected areas, which, if planned properly, they are going to deliver benefits that will exceed the costs. Thank you for your comment.
Yeah, yeah. I think, thank you for pointing that out. And I really think that in addition, we shouldn't be talking about the cost, right? It's an investment in the first place. I just wanted to touch a little bit about the finance mechanism also for the high seas, because we are not really sure what we're going to do in that space and what are we going to finance. 9 out of 10 investors, they want to invest in the ocean, but they don't know how. So I think we're really, going back to your point again, how do we create different markets, different incentives, and move away from business as usual? And even if we often say that SDG 14 is the least funded, etc., we have also seen major changes. And it's not just the public money. We have philanthropy moving into this space. And even within the philanthropy, we see more and more money going towards ocean protection. And there's people here in the room that are really advocates and really showing for that. But I also wanted to think about not just cost. The High Seas Treaty, when it's in place, actually offers a possibility that you can have user fees, access fees, royalties, things that was not possible before. So we can also think about the potential revenue streams that can get in the future. And although the High Seas Treaty is not a framework for blue economy, but it does provide the certainty that's long needed for the private sector to invest in that space. So we just have to have a little bit of imagination, be bold, visionary, but pragmatic, and we can design that financial architecture for the high seas as well. Thanks.
Great, 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 yes, great. So to wrap up the panel, I'm going to ask the panelists to just give a one-sentence answer to the following question. So just one sentence, and that is, what gives you hope for the future? Starting with David.
Thanks. Well, I think what gives me hope is this, so the gap from the 3% well protected to get up to the 30 to 50% we need in high function and health is recognizing the multiple ownership and rights-based processes there are out there, and to leverage finance to support those processes in the right ways. And I think if we can work that out, we will be able to hit this one on the head.
Excellent. That was a long sentence, but thank you, David. Dr. Mesfind?
I think it would be the merge of this global ambition with the recognition that we need to bring more people into the conversations, and co-development is important, co-management is important, but also listening to people who are impacted. And I think that will make our policies and our practices just overall better. So that brings me hope.
Thank you.
Okay, what gives me hope? I would say people. I mean, starting with this audience here, of course, but I would say even beyond that, it's really about people, but also maybe the people who you don't necessarily agree with. You need to have those conversations, because it's what the minister said earlier. I mean, how can we, let's say, don't do this, but what can we do better? So I would say the hope is really people, and all people, let's have those difficult conversations. Let's see how we can do things better together. Thanks.
Thanks, Mina. And Enrique, final sentence.
What gives me hope is the ability of the ocean to bounce back, to recover. We see it every place we give it space. But also, it gives me hope that there are countries like Palau and Seychelles and others that have already done 30 before 30.
Excellent. Those are the kind of leaders we need. So to wrap up the panel, I think the net result we have here is that much progress has been made in the last 15 years, but much more work remains for all of us. If we are to bridge the agreed upon global ambitions with the local realities, we need to focus on implementation, implementation, and implementation. We need to do more, we need to do it better, and we need to do it faster. And I guess we need to remember that we all depend on healthy oceans. So when the ocean wins, so do all of us. And with that, I'll hand over to our
Thank
moderator.
you, Sebastian. Thank you.